the mouth and the meditation of each and every one of our hearts here today will please God, who is our rock and our Redeemer. What scares you? Not startles or spooks you, but unsettles you. What takes your spirit from a place of comfort and peace and makes it uneven. If you're enjoying a moment of quiet, of contentment, what thought, what dread, what idea comes into your mind to ruin that moment of peace? What is it that scares you? Is it thoughts about the economy? Is it a diagnosis? Diagnosis of malignancy? Is it the dentist? Got a cavity? What about life's decisions, major life decisions? Does that bring you fear? Illness? Nausea? What about people? Do people sometimes scare you? How about talking in front of people, public speaking, or praying out loud with people, or witnessing to Christ? Witnessing of Christ to people. Sharing your faith. What about healthcare reform? Does that scare you? Does that wake you up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat? Politics? What about war and thoughts of friends whose lives are in danger? Friends who are serving overseas? What about judgment? Things of spiritual nature? Afterlife? Your job situation? What is it that scares you and unsettles you? That brings an uneasiness into your spirit? Think of that thing. Or those things. Whatever it is that scares you, the Bible has a message of hope for you today. And this message of hope comes in the shape of a poem written by a king 3,000 years ago. Some people don't like poetry. They don't like the flowery language. They wish people would just get down to business and say what they mean and mean what they say. They often don't understand what poets are trying to say. Others thrive on poetry. They think there's nothing more inspirational and more moving than a well-articulated phrase. Whether you like poetry or not, the message that comes from God's poetry has the potential to calm any fear that you are facing today. Psalm 131 is the poem to which I refer. You can read it on the overhead. You can turn to your Bibles if you would like to follow along there. But Psalm 131 says this, O Lord, my heart is not arrogant, my eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like a weaned child that is with me. O Israel, put hope in the Lord from this time on and forevermore. To understand this poetic message, we have to first realize that it is the third of three poems that go together. It is the third of a triad, what they call a triad, or a trilogy of poems, Psalm 129, 130, and 131. This is the third of these three. In this section of Psalms, these Psalms are divided into groups of three, and they go together. They have a theme that ties each of these Psalms together. The whole section is like this. This is just one group of three of many. So to understand what David is saying in Psalm 131, we have to briefly look at Psalms 129 and 130. Psalm 129 is basically a celebration of God's righteous vindication. The song is about how God's people have been oppressed, how God's people have been oppressed for a very long time. It vividly portrays Israel as a man being beaten, whipped, it describes his back like a field, like a farmer's field being plowed, and the furrows are deep. And so the back of Israel is described like this as being whipped and dug out. And it's very vivid imagery of a back that is torn apart by a whip, by an oppressor's whip. And this is Israel. Despite the oppression, despite the beating, despite the opposition that Israel faces, the poet writes and celebrates of their undefeated position. They've been beaten. They've been knocked down. Remember that song from a few years back? I get knocked down, I get up again. Right? Some of you remember that song. Israel has been knocked down, but they get up again. And they've been knocked down again, but they get up again. And they've been knocked down again, and they get up again. Because they are undefeatable, because God is with them. Despite the abuse, despite being conquered, despite being enslaved, despite being opposed by empire after empire after empire, the Egyptians enslave them. The Assyrians take them into captivity. The Babylonians take them into captivity and slavery. And yet they keep on coming back. This tiny little nation in the middle of these giant empires keeps coming back. God vindicates them. These empires cannot conquer and destroy Israel because God is righteous and won't let his people down. Because God is righteous, he will not let wicked people destroy his people. That is the theme of Psalm 129. But this theme poses a problem. And it's a problem that is addressed in the next psalm, in Psalm 130. If God is a righteous God, righteous in his protection of Israel, righteous in his defense of them against the wicked, if God is righteous, won't he also judge the people of Israel? If he's righteous, which the psalm celebrates and places its faith in God's righteousness, if Israel is sinful, as all people are, then won't a righteous God also have to condemn his sinful people? And this is the theme of Psalm 130. Psalm 130 acknowledges the sin of the nation. They don't deny it, but it goes on. Psalm 130 goes on to beg for God's mercy and God's forgiveness. Then the poet waits in reverent silence for God's response. By talking about waiting, what the poet is doing here is he's acknowledging that it's God's right to judge, that God is in a position to judge, and that the nation of Israel submits to God's righteous judgment, waiting for his verdict. Psalm 130 verse 5 says, I wait with longing for the Lord. My soul waits for his word. My soul looks for the Lord more than sentinels at daybreak, or for daybreak. More than sentinels for daybreak, let Israel look for the Lord. So they are waiting for God's judgment. They know it's God's place to judge, and they have begged for his mercy. He concludes by celebrating God's constant companions. He says God has two companions that always travel with him, and this is why I believe God will forgive us. His constant companions, the psalmist says, are love and redemption. Because God is a loving God, he will redeem his sinful people. And this is where our psalm for today picks up. Psalm 129 says, God is a righteous God who condemns sin and destroys a wicked people. Psalm 130 says, but we are wicked too. But because of God's love for his people, his mercy and forgiveness will be bestowed upon them. And so because of his righteous protection and his merciful, loving redemption, Psalm 130 tells us that we, as God's people, Israel, should have hope. But not only should we have hope, it goes on to tell us the way to harvest this hope. It's not just commanding us, hey, you have hope. It helps us understand how it is that we can have this hope. Listen again to Psalm 131. O Lord, my heart is not arrogant. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with things too great or too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like the weaned child that is with me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time on and forevermore. Notice the repetition and the restatement. These are two very common poetic elements in Hebrew poetry. He says, my heart is not arrogant. My eyes are not haughty. My heart is not arrogant. My eyes are not haughty. My heart is not arrogant. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with things too